Welcome back to Kaulignation Season 3, Episode 1. Going to be a little more consistent with the content this year. And wow, is the NASCAR season off to a blazing start in 2024. That's right, 2024. I did not missay that. That's just how fast time is moving. Joining me as always, it's my partner in crime. It's Ryan. How's it going, man? Long time no see, and we're here to talk some NASCAR for the first time, and maybe not the first time between us in a while, but on one of these things in a while.
Hey, Sean. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. New season. We got some new colors here with the new color scheme, blue and white. Got a little bit new updated studio here in the background with a lot more racing gear. So I am jonesed up, ready to get into 2024. So it has been a while since we've had a chance to talk racing, but I am really excited to get into the new season. And you know what? NASCAR, I think, is off to a really, really strong start. These last two restrictor plate races, while with a lot of carnage, has been a very exciting, action-packed start to the year with some really good, strong finishes that have people buzzing all over. Whether it's on social media, I've seen it on ESPN, it is all over the place, and that is great.
You know, say what you want about the new car, the next gen car, if you will, but I have to tell you, there's no doubt about it. The thing runs super speedways very well, and I still stand by it. It drives the road courses very well. Just the racing on the road courses have been a lot to be desired. I haven't gotten to see a full race yet. I've got to see the full highlight packages of the race. I watched about half the 500, the back half of the 500, and I seen about a quarter of the Atlanta race where I was just lacking sleep and I dozed off during it. I'm really excited. There's a lot to talk about right out of the gate, but I want to start here with our guy, AJ Allmendinger, who has signed, if I'm doing my math right, at the very least I guess you probably have to include this year in with the extension, a 4 and possibly 5-year contract extension at the age of, what is he, 41 or 42?
42 now, yeah.
42. I don't know if I've ever heard of a NASCAR driver at any level getting possibly as long as a half-decade contract extension. I understand why they're doing it, but I was pretty shocked to see that, and straight out of Chris Rice's mouth, too.
Yeah, my biggest disappointment to that is how kind of quiet it was. Like, this is a big deal. It's a big deal for AJ. It's a big deal for Kaulig. I would have expected them to be more, I guess, boisterous about the announcement because, it kind of just got slid into it. Now, admittedly, that article was a very good read, but it just kind of got slid into an article saying he was extended through the 2027, possibly 2028 race season. And I was like, okay, this is great news. And it kind of makes me wonder if this has kind of always been the deal. Maybe this isn't even a new contract. Maybe this is what they signed last year, or even the year before, but we're finally getting to hear the extent of what they signed him up for. And what they signed him up for is clearly we can call it the Jeff Gordon lifetime deal at this point, because when this thing's done, as you said, he's, you can do the math. He's going to be pushing 47 years old, if not more. It's going to be the end of his career when this thing's done. So it's exciting that he is, I don't want to say locked into a full-time ride, but he has certainly got a home for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I firmly believe it is a new deal, and probably for multiple reasons. Last year, we heard Chris Rice say he's got a year-over-year deal, or like a rolling deal. When 1 year starts, it automatically clicks in the next year of the deal. So I do believe this is a new deal, and I want to watch how I say this, because believe it or not, I'm going to try to be a glass half full here. Not on purpose, but because I think there's some stuff that maybe certain people aren't being treated fairly yet. And I think you need a longer sample size than 2 races, and we'll get to that in a bit. But, let's be honest here. In the PR game, Kaulig got slaughtered last year, and deservedly so. It's not been very good. They haven't handled their announcements and social media very well. So it doesn't surprise me that this went under the radar. Uh, Look, Justin Haley left. I think they probably would have liked to keep Justin Haley in some way, maybe under the right price or the right circumstances, or even have him go back down to Xfinity. He's gone. He's with Rick Ware Racing, who's now aligned with Roush and or what is it, RFK?
Yeah, Roush Fenway
Uh,
Kozlowski,
yeah,
RFK.
teams are changing all the time. I can't keep up. Um, to me, this is okay. Well, we need something guaranteed to be here that is going to be some level of success. And whether you like AJ Allmendinger or not, make no mistake, he is going to be competitive in every single road course that this guy runs in both series, and he will be serviceable when he makes cup starts that aren't on road courses, and he'll be, a top 10 guy in Xfinity on most race weekends. So the Chandler Smith debacle that didn't end well at all. When none of us were very happy to see that go down in the way it went down. So to me, it's not a desperate move, but to me, it's a smart move. It's like, hey, this is our bread and butter. This is
Yeah.
why we're on the map. It's this guy. He, I do have a question for you, and I want to find out if it plays into it. But like to me, it's you had to do this. Maybe not 5 years. And that's what it has the potential to be. Four for sure, possibly five, which is just unheard of at this age, in my opinion. I don't even think Harvick's extension was at this age and for that long. Um, so my question to you is, how much of this is AJ? One, he's got a young child now, and you start to hit that 4 or 5 year old range. You start to remember a lot of things. How much does he want Little Arrow to see him race? But also, how important is it that he stopped racing full time for 2 or 3 years, and that was a breather. So in reality, yeah, he's 42, but in terms of racing and wear and tear on the body, it's really 38 or 39.
Well, you more or less put my answer right there in the end. That I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he took a couple years off and allowed him to recharge his batteries and refind his love for the sport and then obviously he found a home at Kaulig where Chris Rice, Matt Kaulig have allowed him to thrive, right? His personality has been allowed to shine. He's been, welcomed in as a member of the family. And I just think it's created such an environment for him that even when he struggles, even when he's having frustrating weeks and down and on his luck or down on himself, that there's always that support system that he never had. And listen, we can go back to even back in 2012 when he had his issue with Adderall, right? And Roger Penske came to his aid and gave him an opportunity, and he had support, but not to this extent. This has allowed him to, I think, really feel his youth again. And now maybe this isn't the blueprint for all racing drivers, but when you see race car drivers that are starting, I mean, listen, Joey Logano was a cup driver at 20. Ty Gibbs started at 19. These young guys are going to get burned out. It wouldn't surprise me if we start seeing stretches where drivers take a year or two off, refine that magic, and come back and run into their late 40s because truly, statistically, and this is not something, this is not, opinion, this is fact. Race car drivers are in their primes. They're at their very best in their early to mid 40s. So right now, we saw it with obviously AJ. We've seen it with Harvick. We've seen it with so many other drivers that really start winning their championships right in this point in their career. It makes sense. If he's competitive, if he's still got it, why not keep going?
I mean, they need him. The fact is, they're probably not attracting another young talent that was like Chandler Smith esque ready.
Yeah.
Um, Anything that they're going to get is going to be a project. Doesn't mean that project can't turn out. Doesn't mean that SVG is not going to end up being a Kaulig guy in the long run. It just depends, right? So I was really excited to see that, and I was really happy to know that on some level or another, whether it's just in Xfinity or Xfinity in part-time Cup, or even eventually back up to full-time Cup. Who knows how it all plays out? But that AJ Allmendinger is going to be racing in NASCAR for a long time to come. That excites me a lot, and I think if you're a fan of his and a fan of Kaulig's, it means in some way, shape, or form, Kaulig is going to be competitive on some tracks.
Well, and just to round out where AJ Allmendinger has is going, this last weekend was his 100th career start in the Xfinity Series, which is kind of that milestone of, okay, this guy has been in the series. He's a regular. He's got enough races under his belt. He has the fourth best winning percentage of any race car driver in the history of the series. Right now, as of today, he has a 17.2% winning percentage in the Xfinity Series. Ranks number 4 just behind Kyle Busch, Joey Logano, and Mark Martin. All you got to say is this guy is not just winning, but he's winning at a Hall of Fame level. And there you can, yeah, you're going to lock him up as long as possible.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And hey, I'm excited to see him. That brings us to Daytona. Look, the changes to the team, some of them I was pleasantly surprised that SVG is going to be in a Kaulig car as much as he is going to be this year. That was a win after what I feel like was a lot of losses in the offseason. So we get the Daytona 500. I don't remember what the Xfinity race was called. Um, but anyway, let's start with the 500. AJ Allmendinger, like this guy's just money. He might not like that racing, but I think I've seen that he has either the highest or the second highest average finishing position in Daytona 500 history, which is nuts.
Yep. And he is the only driver that's competed more than 10 Daytona 500s to not have a DNF in the race. So, not only is he competitive at these things, and again, there's so much luck involved when it comes to these restrictor plate races that, it's kind of a grain of salt stat. But the fact of the matter is, he is now 13 for 13 at finishing the Daytona 500. So, yeah, I mean, he's shown his displeasure for this stuff. But honestly, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I feel like that opinion might actually be changing a little bit because these last few years, even when he won his Xfinity race in 2022, he's found much more success in these recent years at the restrictor plate tracks, and I think he has kind of gotten to that wily veteran phase of his career where, he knows how to stay out of trouble, and that is half the battle. If you can survive these things, you got a chance, right? There was during the Daytona 500. With the wreck with 9 to go, he was probably running 18th, 20th, something like that. He was about the 6th or 7th row back on, 3 wide bottom, right? And they wreck at the front. And every single car gets piled into this wreck. But AJ has the wisdom to slam on the brakes, slow the car down, get it to the low side of the groove. He gets rear bumpered by Bubba Wallace ever so slightly, but the car is fine. Everybody else in front of him tore their shit up. But he walked out of there or drove out of there with virtually no damage. And that's just that skill set of understanding how to avoid these things. And he was able to put himself into a position to get a really good finish.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, he didn't lead any laps at Atlanta, correct?
At Atlanta, he did. He led 8 laps.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
this stats wrong then, because I'm looking at these stats aren't updated, is what it is. So he led 8 laps at Atlanta and 9 laps during the Daytona 500. The Daytona, I didn't see his leading at Atlanta, but it doesn't surprise me that he did. That car he was driving at the Daytona 500 had a real chance of winning that race, in my opinion. Like, he got out front
and he held
and was
it.
controlling it on the bottom, too.
Yeah.
And he had Hemrick behind him at some point. I think he had, oh, man, I forget who else was. I think Chastain might have been behind him at some point.
It was Chris Buescher actually was a great partner of his. They tag teamed.
They got some history together too. So
yeah, going back to the 500, that was a race winning car. Listen, in years past, even last year when he finished, he was running 4th. I think he got 6th because he got wrecked there not this year but last year. But that car wasn't a race winning car. It was a hell of a pusher. He could get himself to the front. He even got himself out front, but he couldn't hold it. This year, they got out front, and they belonged there. They held that position. I mean, it was good to have a teammate behind him. That was definitely key to that. But he could control the lanes. He was able to go up, down, middle, wherever he needed to go, and he was able to continue to get the runs to hold the position. Listen, I don't think he was going to win. He was inside of the 3rd row on the final lap. Obviously, anything can happen. The last lap was cut short. He probably wasn't in a race winning position, but the car was good enough to win, and he was definitely in a good enough position to get himself a top 3 or 4 finish. And he still finished sixth even after the accident. So, couldn't have been happier with how him and Hemrick got caught up in the wreck with 9 to go. But truly, both cars ran very, very strongly at the 500.
Yeah, so a couple of points there. One, and let's stick with the Kaulig. We'll sort of actually, you know what? Let's start with this. 2 years in a row, and I believe I read somewhere like 4 of the last 9, so almost half of them on super speedway races have had a yellow come out basically by turn 1 of the final lap. That's got to end. People are paying for a finish ending under. I get it. You can't restart the thing 50 times, but I think when you see the white flag, it cannot be the last flag that you see. I think you need to use that overtime line, if you will, on the last lap. If you don't make it, you restart. If I'm a paying member, a paying audience member of that race, I'm pissed off. And if I went 2 years in a row, I'm really pissed off because like you're just not getting to the end of the races. I don't care if the overtime line is halfway down the backstretch; it does not need to be any further than that. But get through turns 1 and 2 before you end the race. To me, I get it. You want to save costs. You don't want a bunch of wrecks, but you know what? You're racing at these type of races. You're choosing to race at these type of racetracks and have this style of racing. Let's stop with yellow flag finishes. Like if it, give it 2 or 3 cracks at it. But I got to tell you, I really don't like it, and I've seen a lot of discourse about this online.
Man, it's such a touchy debate because I do agree with you that it sucked. It was such an anticlimactic way to end the race, you know, and it was a similar deal last year. But I've also seen in the past that they have gone out of their way to throw a yellow feet before they get to the start finish line. I've seen multiple cases of this, and that pisses people off too. You're never going to make it. Somebody's going to be upset about either side of this coin. I tend to agree that I would like to see them finish this thing, and maybe there can be some level of overtime line through turn 1, but it's such a difficult discussion because we also have situations at the cup level. It's extra prominent at the Xfinity and Truck Series, but even at the cup level, you give these guys a couple opportunities to wad them up on a green white checkered, and they've taken advantage of it, and it's gone 2, 3 attempts to get a finish, and that upsets a lot of people as well. So I don't know if there's a good right answer. I would love to see a finish, and maybe there is a point where if they don't get to through turn 1 on the final lap, rack them up again. But it's a slippery slope. So it's for me. I think the final lap, once you take it, is a good way to end the race, even if it does become anticlimactic. Because I know NASCAR in the past has been willing to be quick on the trigger with the yellow and throw it before they get to the white flag, if at all possible.
Yeah, well, we'll have to wait and see if they do anything with it. I just it's anticlimactic. You're right. It's unfortunate. You mentioned 10 500s in a row, no DNS. AJ Allmendinger, excuse me, which is that's ridiculous. Like that's an insane statistic. Um, you have 3 or 4, maybe even 5, and I go, there's probably a lot of luck in that. You have 10, it stops becoming just about luck and becoming you have a talent for avoiding things. Now, sometimes you just can't avoid things. I remember AJ flipping at Talladega in the Valvoline 43 car.
Remember that one?
I believe he also flipped in the 47 one time too. Um, and so he doesn't always avoid the mess, but he just has a talent for being able to do it. And that brings us to Josh Williams. Now people on this podcast might not know, I was very critical about this signing, not because I don't like Josh Williams as a person. Everything I've seen, he seems like he's a hoot. Seems like someone I would get along with. Just given where we thought the organization was heading, say a year ago from right now, and to where they are now, it just, it was a bummer. It was a letdown. It's a pay to play guy. It's very. I know you and I've talked off air. Reminds me a little bit of Landon Castle in terms of the signing. Although Landon Castle wasn't making cup starts, but so there's people that are getting on Josh Williams because let's be honest, he's had 3 starts, 2 Xfinity starts, and 1 cup start, and it has gone about as bad as you could possibly imagine. Um, and there's some people that aren't very happy with that. Look, I do think there's some talent to avoiding wrecks, and I think you know specifically the one at Atlanta. Um, could he have done something different? Yeah. Hemrick in the last one at Daytona 500, I thought, went, you know, in way too hard as the wreck was happening. What are you doing? But I think Josh Williams deserves some slack here, or to be cut some slack. Pardon me. I think when you look at the body of work, it's 3 races. It's essentially 3 super speedways on 2 different tracks. It happens. Let's wait 4 or 5 races before writing this guy out. He's going to be terrible on road courses too. I'm just being honest. That's not going to be pretty for the Xfinity starts. But thank God you got AJ and SVG out there. Doesn't really matter what Josh does on those tracks. No offense to him, but he deserves more of a leash than what some people are giving him, and I'm not expecting much even when he does get that leash. I don't think he's a chase contender. I don't think he'll even be close to the chase in Xfinity. But I also don't think he's a 25th to 30th place guy. And in terms of cup, he's in over his head, but he has somebody that's willing to pay for him to be in the ride, and they got to fill the seat. So my advice to everybody out there, whether you're a Kaulig fan or you're just hating to hate, give the guy a chance. 2 races on 2 super speedways is not that.
Yeah, yeah, and we haven't seen enough of him in the Cup car to even give him see how good he is. At the Clash, he was the first car to not qualify, out qualified his teammate, by the way. Obviously he didn't get a chance to run, but he qualified 23rd. Not bad. Didn't make the race. That sucked. Yesterday in Atlanta, he wrecked out on lap 2. I didn't actually see his involvement in the wreck. I mean, there was a 18 car pileup. A lot of cars got wrecked, but it was lap 2. I mean, I guess you could say he didn't qualify well, but Kaulig will not qualify well all year. They're not going to be very good for the most part. So he just happened to be in the wrong spot at the wrong time. But the Cup car itself drives very differently than the Xfinity car. And I'm not saying the Cup car is easier to drive by any stretch of the imagination, but it has a lot more downforce, which brings a different skill set to the table. And we honestly just don't know if Josh Williams is going to adjust to that or not. There's a possibility he could be stronger in the Cup car than he is in the Xfinity car. Until we see him, we don't know. So I agree on that front that we got to give him a lot more leash and leeway. On the Xfinity side, the Daytona 500, or the Beef It's What's for Dinner, I think is what it was, 300 or whatever, he wasn't very fast. Like, of the 5 Kaulig cars in that race, there are 5 of them, he was the slowest. He was running in the mid-20s, back of the pack. He lost the main draft, and then he had a mechanical failure of some kind. So maybe that was part of his issue. Maybe he had a sour engine. Nobody in the broadcast even really mentioned him. So it's hard to see what his deal was there. And then in the Xfinity car at Atlanta, kind of like the same deal. Just really unfortunate. It's lap 1, lap 2. Made contact with somebody. You could see the fender rub. Lost a tire. 3 laps into the race, had a cut tire, went 3 laps down. Cut another tire, went 7 laps down. Cut a third tire, went 10 laps down. Yeah, he just, we don't know. And I'm definitely willing to give him more opportunities. The restrictor plate track is just not a good indicator of how good of a driver you are. And in the Xfinity Series, this Xfinity Series competition is probably the strongest it's been in a long, long, long time. There's a good 12 to 15 cars that are capable of making the playoffs before you get to Josh Williams. So if he's actually able to make the playoffs in any capacity, that would be an excellent year. I would call that a win by a wide margin. but I do expect him to be about a 15th place car week in and week out, which is, when compared to Chandler Smith, is definitely a letdown. And I agree with you. Going from Chandler Smith to Josh Williams is a downgrade. There's no way around it. But I've also seen them give Daniel Dye a few opportunities, and he is a young driver that could potentially grow, over the course of a couple of years into somebody that could be a viable driver. But definitely, Josh Williams is not that guy. But if he runs top 15, maybe sneaks his way into the playoffs, I'd be happy with that.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I'm not at top 15. I know we talked about this before, simply because I watched. I think I no, I read an Allmendinger interview where he said as long as we don't shoot ourselves in the foot, we're basically a guaranteed top 10 every race. And I don't agree with that either. The Kaulig Xfinity cars were not very good last year. They slipped. Hemrick got it going in the back half, which he deserves all the credit in the world for. But for a good chunk of that year, they started good and they ended pretty decent. But in the whole middle part of that season, they were terrible. And you can only make chicken salad out of chicken shit so many times. So I look at AJ as top 15 at worst in Xfinity. Hopefully top 10 a whole lot. Obviously, the tracks he's strong at, he's going to be up there. But Josh Williams, yeah, he's probably going to be battling for, in my opinion, top 20 finishes. That might not be the worst thing in the world, though. You know, the Xfinity lineup is more impressive this year than at least the last couple of years we've been watching and talking about this team running Xfinity. Um, so yeah, we'll have to see. But like Josh deserves more of a leash, guys. Like I was super critical over the signing. I still think there was better options earlier that you could have gone with. But fishes were fishes were wishes. The world would be an ocean. Um, this brings me to SVG. I got to tell you, man, surpassed every one of my expectations so far. I know the Daytona race was a little ugly, but at the end of the day, he still finished 12th place. At the end of the day, your finishing position matters. Atlanta, I didn't see any of the race other than the highlight package, but I'm watching him in the draft in the highlight package, which you can find on YouTube. There's a couple different ones. There's an extended one that's like 17 minutes long. Um, Dude, he did not look like somebody that didn't know what he was doing.
He picked it up in a hurry. And listen, Daytona was frustrating for me, and it's not his fault. It was his. He he DNQ'd in the ARCA race. Trackhouse bought his way into the ARCA race and promptly got wrecked out 5 laps in. So when he strapped into this Xfinity race, he had no experience outside of the simulators, and it showed. Right, it was a fast car. He qualified fifth, but he got in the draft and he struggled. And he wasn't able to get up behind AJ, give AJ the pushes he needed to be competitive. He was falling back, and he started to kind of get the hang of it. And I was like, okay, this is okay, but not to the level we kind of expect from obviously AJ, but even from a Justin Haley, Daniel Hemrick, Chandler Smith, that these guys that have been growing up in racing that know how to draft, to get up there and help the team. And he wasn't able to do that at Daytona. Boy, light switch flipped at Atlanta. His car was better than AJ's by, I think, a fairly wide margin. AJ didn't have a very good car at Atlanta. Speaking of making chicken soup out of chicken salad, right? Like AJ did what he could. But SVG's car looked great. It was able to suck up. He did a great job of getting behind cars and kind of doing that island hopping thing where he would get, a little, put his bumper to the, his nose to the rear end of the other car, bring him back, use the side draft, make some passes. He looked really, really strong. So I was very impressed with how quickly, week to week, SVG was able to make a jump. And again, his car was by clear evidence better than AJ's last week in Atlanta. So, I'm curious to see what he's able to do on the more technical tracks as we start going to these 1.5 miles, 1 miles, half miles, how he adjusts to those. But so far, he's passing with flying colors.
Let's talk about the Atlanta finish, the Cup race. Obviously wild. 3 cars coming to the line. Reminds me of you off air mentioned. Was it Craven Spencer?
Ricky
Uh,
Craven and Kurt Busch.
Kurt Busch, sorry. Craven Busch. Then there was Harvick Gordon in the Xfinity series. The one that that I come to is Allmendinger, Cindric, Allgaier. They're all battling for the win over the last 2 laps. ends up wrecking like the first 15 finishing cars across the line. Way back in the day, Petty and Pearson had a similar finish. Um, I don't know if it's the best finish ever, but it's definitely one of them. And just wow, again, like we said off the top, these cars are incredible on super speedway style racing.
Yeah, the next gen car is elite at super speedway racing, and it's elite at mile and a half racing. I am so excited about next week at Las Vegas. Like the racing next week at the mile and a half is going to be spectacular. But obviously for what it gives up, it struggles at the road courses, not because they're bad. They're too good. There's too much grip at the road courses. They actually need to slip and slide more. But yeah, with the shows that they put on when they go to the restrictor plate tracks, when they go to these mile and a halves, it's just a lot of fun. It's really good racing, and NASCAR has taken a lot of heat, for some of the issues that they brought. Maybe they probably rushed the car to a year early, but I think it's doing exactly what they wanted it to do. It's really brought the competition closer together. Of course, the big teams will inevitably start pulling away, especially at the more technical mile and a half. So we're going to start seeing Joe Gibbs, Roger Penske, Hendrick Motorsports. They're going to start rising to the top like they always do. But man, the show that they put on at Atlanta, just front to back, top to bottom, one of the very best races I've ever seen. And the finish, obviously, three wide, top three were .007 apart, like the third closest finish in history. Speaks for itself. The finish was outstanding. But more than the finish, the race was spectacular. The ability for the cars to pass, move forward, move back, make moves, throughout from the first lap to the last lap was just super exciting, and they were on the ragged edge. The detractors of this race will say, "Oh, they wrecked too much," or there were too many cautions. But the vast majority of the race, the issues that these drivers were having were they were going into turn three, they would get sideways and they would spin out. That's what you want to see. You want to see these cars spinning themselves out because they're on the ragged edge of control. And not only were these guys on the ragged edge of control, but they're doing it in a restrictor plate manner where they had to be full throttle. I mean, it may not be the best race in the history of NASCAR. That's obviously the highest of bars, but it's going to go down as one of the best of this generation without question.
Yeah, it's hard to complain with the racing that we've got so far. We don't have a ton of time on episode one here, but has anything other than what's going on with Kaulig stood out to you in the first couple of races through all the series?
Man, I guess I had a lot more expectations going into the Xfinity series. The first couple races haven't been very good. And obviously, and that's not because our guys haven't had super spectacular results. The Xfinity race in Atlanta was the polar opposite of the Cup race. There was a single file train, nobody could get anything going, and the racing was just not very good. So, but the Xfinity cars do everything else right, but the race in Atlanta was a real struggle. But I'm just really happy with the direction NASCAR as a whole has kind of taken the sport this year. They've really kind of opened up the playbook a little bit. They're letting these drivers be more personable. I like what the broadcast has brought to the table. It's small details. They have started interviewing the pit crews. They have, kind of like an NFL style introduction to the pit crews. The production of the TV broadcast where they're highlighting cars now with a little yellow hue around it, when they're trying to talk to somebody specifically is just a nice touch. So I think the direction that NASCAR is going, where they're going to continue to go with the scheduling. I know we're way too early to start talk scheduling, but how they want to kind of start expanding their productivity, going to different places, just in general. Maybe it's just the high of the new season, and 36 weeks from now I'm going to be a little bit more grumpy. But I think where we are as a whole, the sport's in a really good place. We got to do TV contract. I really feel like they have a chance to take the momentum. And I know you didn't want to really dabble into the Netflix show yet, but just the momentum of what that's going to do in terms of drawing a wider audience and trying to build a bigger fan base is going to be really strong going into the rest of the season.
So yeah, I mean, not that I don't want to dive into it. I don't have anything to add on it, and probably won't for some time. I'm looking at the schedule now, and we are only, we're basically what's the date today? 24th,
26th.
26th. So we're less than 1 month away from Coda, and you knew I had to go here at some point. Allmendinger is not listed as driving in the 16 Cup car for that race anyway. I guess that's not necessarily true, but we know SVG is going to drive that race for Kaulig. They have the trophy hunting moniker. I got to tell you, man, I've been glass half full. I think this entire episode. Maybe people don't think so, but this is where I got to put my foot down. If you do not run a third Cup car in that race for Allmendinger, then you're not fucking trophy hunting. It's not trophy hunting anymore. Stop calling it trophy hunting. It doesn't matter if Celsius is willing to pick up the bill or one of the other sponsors or Matt slaps one of his sponsors on the car. You have a chance to have AJ Allmendinger and SVG in that race. Two guys that if they don't get into trouble, more than likely or at the very worst, they're going to finish top 10, and both have a shot at winning the thing. To not do that, and again, there's no one saying they're not doing that. They very well might. To not do that, there's not a reasonable excuse in the world for me why you should not be trying to do that, given what has gone on with this organization. And hopefully they do. Hopefully one of their sponsors or a new sponsor is like, let's get AJ in the 13 or whatever number they want to call it. I really hope that happens. Who knows? Maybe there's some weird world where AJ's in the 91. I don't know. But like to me, Allmendinger should be on every single road course, period. And him and SVG together, good luck to the field.
Yeah, dominant duo, right? And I'm not going to disagree with you. If he's not in the Cup race at the road courses this year, it would be an absolute travesty. And one of the things we talked about in years past that there's been 7 road courses or 6 road courses. Well, now we're down to I think 5. And I'm not 5's a good number, but I think we're down to 5 now. And SVG is scheduled to run 3 of them, which is fine. SVG is an elite road course racer. He needs to be in the Cup races when they go to road courses. But if AJ is not in every single road course race this year, it makes no sense. I mean, he's a proven race-winning commodity at these things. He's the only one that's gotten Kaulig a win. It would be shocking to me if they don't bring out a third car. And they haven't announced anything. Like, I don't want to get too riled up one way or the other. But yeah, the fact that they haven't already come out and said, yep, AJ's running every single road course this year is concerning. And now we also, reverting back to that article that came out last week, they have said AJ is expected to be 12 to 15, maybe even some more Cup races this year, which is half the schedule, give or take. And if half the schedule doesn't include all of the road courses, what are we doing here? That it would be shocking to me if that's the direction they went in. And I get it, busting out a third car that's not chartered, right? Without a sponsor is a losing money proposition. They would have to hire a pit crew. They'd have to hire engineering. They'd have to put all that money into a car. I get that there would be costs, a massive cost involved, but the potential outcome of putting him in a car is winning. And that to me outweighs any additional risk. So yeah, if the 13 isn't busted out, and honestly, we saw them do it at Daytona. Admittedly, it was the Xfinity Series, but they brought 5 cars to the track, including, pawning out one of the cars to SS Greenlight. That was a Kaulig prepared race car. So if they're willing to do it for the Xfinity Series, they should be willing to do it for the Cup Series as well.
Who drove that car again?
Daniel Suarez.
How'd he do?
got wrecked out early.
Uh, mm, eesh.
Every
Um,
single Kaulig car at Daytona got tore up. Every single one of them, all five.
Rough.
Yeah,
Yeah, rough. Yeah. I mean, I he just won at the Glen with Celsius. I'd be pretty stunned if Celsius is like, yeah, you know what, we're not interested in this. My guess is they are interested. At what price tag, though? We'll have to wait and see. Let me ask you this: so, calling aside, obviously on the cup level, you're looking at Hemrick and assorted drivers. Apologies for my cat in the background. But and then just in terms of the Cup Series, is there anybody you're keeping an eye on this year where it's like, okay, well, I'm very curious to see how they do um, in the series because I have something I refer to as Sage's Rat Pack, and it's three guys that I'm watching closely all through the year. But I want to hear who you're watching. Like everybody watches the big name drivers. It's probably one of the reasons why I'm not particularly interested in the Netflix show because they're just going to focus on the top tier guys. And to me, it's not about that. That's why the F1 shows a success is they focus on the smaller teams too, not just the well, not really a smaller F1 team when you think about it, but you know what I mean. The
yeah, I know what
guys
you mean.
that
Yeah,
don't do as well. But
yeah,
is there anybody that you're watching just in the cup level?
yeah. I mean, I guess this is a double-edged question for me. The driver I'm watching as a potential candidate to race for Kaulig Racing in 2025 is Daniel Suarez. I figured that Daniel Suarez, who is on the hot seat at Trackhouse, with Zane Smith, with Carson Hocevar, with SVG, all under the Trackhouse banner, that if Suarez didn't have a spectacular year, he could be potentially looking for a ride in 2025. And with the alliance that we've seen grow between Kaulig Racing and Trackhouse Racing, I had my eye on Daniel Suarez as a potential, similar to the crew chief swap, a driver swap to go to Kaulig. Now, Daniel Suarez just won less than 24 hours ago, and may have just re-cement, planted his seed at Trackhouse going into the next year. But that's actually who I had my eyes on going into the season. So I'm still curious to see how that plays out because at the end of the day, you can't invest in a driver like Zane Smith and you can't invest in a driver like SVG and not expect to put them in the cup car going into 2025. Somebody's going to be without a ride that needs to be at a cup series level. So I'm kind of keeping my eyes on that. And then just in general, the Spire cars. I'm very interested in how Corey LaJoy does. I'm very interested in how Carson Hocevar does. And Zane Smith has kind of been a afterthought to this point, but we're only two races in. So I'm kind of tracking all three of those drivers this year.
Well, you named two of my three, Hocevar and Smith. I'm watching closely. I made sure to see how they were doing during the race, pulling up on the app. Um, and then the other one's Justin Haley. I have high. I don't know if I have high hopes, but I'm hoping for the best for him. I want to believe Rick Ware Racing is serious. Maybe more serious than Kaulig's been about competing at the cup level over the last half a year in terms of the improvements, in terms of the RFK alliance. Um, so, Haley, Smith, and Hocevar, I'm watching closely each week. I'm not expecting a ton, but on weeks where they fare well, I'll be pretty happy. In terms of the Suarez thing, that's very interesting. I wouldn't be shocked to see Suarez replace Daniel Hemrick at some point, but at the moment, you have another car that has a bunch of drivers in it. So sponsorship matters, right? So,
Yeah.
Driver X doesn't have a ride but has a sponsorship. Driver X is probably going to get one of those rides.
Yeah, and that's my personal opinion with Suarez. He's very popular. The Mexican racing. There's a huge support for racing in Mexico. Sergio Perez in F1 has a massive following. Suarez has grown a massive following. I think he has sponsorship. He would be supported. Just is he going to have the ride? And listen, there's another topic for another day that I want to get into about this whole Kaulig Trackhouse situation, but I think that partnership is real, and I think there is definitely opportunities, one way or the other, whether it's SVG or Daniel Suarez, to go Cup racing next year. So I'm very intrigued how this plays out, and obviously, if Suarez continues to really race well, and produce, show that he's capable of his position at that team, that I think then we have to start having discussions about some of the other drivers. So I'm very curious to see how it plays out. I mean, he's obviously going to have a lot of momentum now that he got this win. So, but all in all, there's a lot of storylines. Whether it's listen, Rick Ware Racing, they have looked better, by the way. Kaz Grala got a top 15 yesterday. I mean, a lot of it was attrition. He survived the attrition. Justin Haley has looked pretty strong at these restrictor plate tracks, but we know his prowess at restrictor plate racing. I'm curious to see if any of that translates once they go to Vegas next week and the rest of the season. So I'm not expecting a lot. I do think the Rick Ware cars at the end of the day will kind of matriculate back to the bottom of the pack where they have been. I would not expect them to even outrace the Kaulig cars. And if they do, boy, we're going to be having some serious conversations later in the year.
Oh man. Well, maybe you were the maybe you weren't the glass half full guy in this episode compared. Role reversal here, maybe, but you know what? It's very, very possible that ends up happening. We'll have to wait and see. I also wouldn't rule out the possibility of a manufacturer change. I forget who was talking about it, but someone was saying you want to watch after the 2024 season when there's a bunch of deals up. If we get some swapping of manufacturers and people trying to recruit other teams, and there could be opportunity there. I like the Trackhouse thing. I don't know if it's as definitive as an on-track alliance as could be. Like, I don't think they're running Trackhouse Power or anything like that, but would love for them to do so. I'm just very skeptical about how much I buy into this team's willingness to compete moving forward, willingness to spend the money that you need to spend to compete. And hey, it's not my money, so at the end of the day, I really can't say too much. The big thing that got me last year was simply Chris Rice probably overstepped with certain things that he said. But hey, I'm excited for this year. Vegas is this weekend. I expect AJ will be fairly strong in the Xfinity race. I'll be honest, I'm not expecting much of the Cup cars. What is it, Kraus and Hemrick this weekend? So
Yep.
you're probably happy if you have one of the two cars in the top 25, frankly. So, but in the Xfinity, who knows? I'm excited to see AJ probably top 10 and SVG. Like, to me, I have a ton of interest in seeing what happens there because even though AJ's extended for 5 years, like, regardless if SVG's in a Kaulig car or a Trackhouse car or wherever, I'm invested in this guy. This guy has won me over as a fan, and that takes a lot for me to be won over as a fan. And I'm really, really excited to see what happens with him on all style of tracks this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the excitement level around SVG is really high. He's only I think increased that with how well he's ran the last couple weeks. And listen, sponsors aren't the end all be all, right? Obviously, you need them to compete, and that's the whole reason we kind of were in the situation we're in. But SVG is bringing so much momentum and so much popularity to the sport, to Kaulig, to Trackhouse. Obviously WeatherTech came on board. They just introduced a new sponsor for this upcoming weekend as well. I think it's actually, I'm sorry, I don't remember off what it is off the top of my head, but it's a new sponsor for that. You
Something
know,
else.
something health, focused health, something like that. That's a big deal. And again, I recognize SVG is a Trackhouse driver, but that money is still going into Kaulig's pocket. And as long as SVG is driving a Kaulig car, there's going to be a lot of momentum. There's going to be a lot of TV time. There's going to be a lot of interest around what he's doing and how that Kaulig car races is a very important for the organization going forward for the rest of the year. So I do expect him, even when he struggles, to be given the best opportunities to succeed.
Absolutely. Final thoughts, man, as we wrap up episode 1, season 3 of Kaulignation.
Well, we're off to a blazing start. I think from a Kaulig racing perspective, it's been a tough start to the year. We didn't even really get into the boondoggle of what happened with AJ in the Xfinity race at the end of the race, where they came down pit road to put gas in the car for the green-white checkered when everybody was running out of gas, and they still managed to run out of gas. Like, it was... I don't know what happened. That was a massive, massive, massive miscalculation on the team's part. So, finished 13th, should have finished second or third. So the team dropped the ball there. So, Kaulig has got to get right, and the first 2 weeks have been a real struggle. Daytona 500 was really good. I was very happy with that result, but the team itself has really got to get themselves focused forward going to Las Vegas. I'm expecting a bounce back weekend for the Xfinity cars. I expect, at a bare minimum, SVG and AJ to run well. But the Cup side is just constantly going to be a struggle. What you said, I think top 25s has got to be what we're looking at. We'll see. Maybe Hemrick gets comfortable, but I think top 25 is the expectation. But as a NASCAR as a whole, been a great start to the season. I'm super excited, and I am very, very invested in how the rest of the year plays out. Oh, you muted.
I don't know where my expectation level is for SVG at Vegas. Simply, that's a banking cookie cutter track that he has zero experience on. And I will say this as a guy who used to do a lot of iRacing, Vegas and old Atlanta and Charlotte, tracks like that that have some banking in the turns were the easiest ones for me to adapt to and get used to. So I'm hoping, SVG, who's obviously more talented than this bus driver from Canada, um, really, really excited to see what happens there. I think AJ will be good. You have more faith in Williams than I do, but I would say this: I would not be shocked to see Josh Williams come out and run top 15 and have a solid weekend. My expectations are super low this year for Kaulig. I'm just going to enjoy AJ and SVG and everything we get from them, and enjoy the season as much as I can. But that is going to do it for our show. Check out Kaulignation on Facebook, Dinger Nation on Facebook. What is our Twitter handle again? I don't have Twitter open right now, man.
It is at Kaulignation.
At Kaulignation, easy to remember. But for Ryan, I'm Sean, and we'll see you next week or the week after to recap one or two races. We'll see what happens. But NASCAR's back. I'm excited. We hope all you are too. Have a great week.